at Women in Streaming Media. Welcome to our Ally of the Month call. Women in Streaming Media spans globally, and with the different time zones in mind, this call is recorded for the convenient viewing, ensuring that everyone can learn with the experiences. And let's start on time to ensure that we cover everything. Every month, we connect on Ally of the Month call to recognize and celebrate the efforts of individual leaders in the industry, to encourage the positive behavior, to build the inclusive culture, share the best practices, and create a continuous engagement with the allies. Foster the collaboration, acknowledge the impact, and most importantly, create the awareness about the allyship. And today's call is packed with the exciting agenda. First, I will give you the quick introduction to the Women in Streaming Media Network, our allyship program, especially to new members who are joining first time. Next, Lisa will introduce you to Ally of the Month. Following that, we will have the engaging AMA session with our ally. We will have we already have some curated questions, but feel free to ask your questions in the chat window. And finally, we will conclude the call by sharing our upcoming event details. So let's start with it. Since we always get new members, let me quickly introduce you to everyone to the Women in Streaming Media Network and Allyship program. As a global networking organization, our mission is to increase the diversity and give more visibility to women leaders in the streaming media industry. Our membership is free, offers the opportunity to connect with supportive community of women across the areas of streaming media industry. It also gives the access to the community to connect with other women in streaming media or video technology or broadcasting or OTT platforms and related industries. Sometimes the best way to reach our potential is to learn from someone with the experience. Our award-winning mentorship program is based on foundation of educate, connect, and empower. We believe education is the key to personal and professional success, and we inspire the next generation through engaging outreach activities. Our education pillar empowers the women in streaming media by offering the resources and opportunities for the growth at every stage of career. Through our speaking engagement program, members are given platform to feature their expertise and contribute to the industry discussions and panels. We have been instrumental in placing the female leaders across the globe in keynote panels and webcast and podcast. Allyship is center of our community, and allyship in the workplace is such an important topic. It's important aspect of the fostering an inclusive environment for all the employees. It involves the individuals actively supporting, advocating for the underrepresented groups such as women, or creating a sense of belonging and promoting diversity. We launched the Allyship program in January 2024, and we are creating a network of allies to lead by example and amplify women's voices. And create a kind of support network to represent to foster the representation in the streaming media industry. Our program also raises the awareness about the challenges women face and the importance of active allyship in the inclusive work environment. It also recognizes that allyship is more than just accepting the diversity and inclusion. It's about taking meaningful steps every day. It sets a benchmark for the other men, showing how to be effective allies and advocates for the women with individual, interpersonal, or structural efforts. We would love to see more leaders in the streaming media industry stepping up and leading by example, amplifying women voices. Sorry about this, my throat is slightly bad. Our allyship program also offers flexible structure like AMA section, panel discussion, and workshops. Sorry. All right, the wait is over. Let's dive into the Ally of the Month. Lisa, over to you.
Okay. Okay, so a few months back at the Black Hat Conference in Las Vegas, cyber giant Palo Alto Networks featured the display that you're currently looking at in the front entrance of their booth. As you can imagine, the decision by Palo Alto to depict women dressed in black, tight-fitting evening gowns with Palo Alto branded lampshades sparked a pouring of criticism. While many attendees may have made passing comments about the display, we applaud Ganesh, the awesome, for actually taking this a step further and calling out this bad behavior on LinkedIn. Notably, these are not mannequins, these are actual women, if you did not attend. So, as a result of this call out and criticisms, the CEO of the Palo Alto Networks made an official apology, stating that what occurred was an isolated incident and was unacceptable, further adding that they could have, should have, and will do better. He wanted to reassure everyone of their continued commitment to celebration and inclusion and diversity. This is an awesome example of how allies can drive change, showing how individual efforts contribute towards a more inclusive environment for women. So with that, that's how we today are bringing you Ganesh, the awesome, as our male ally of the month. So we have the pleasure of bringing from London, we have Ganesh, the awesome, joining us for our ally of streaming media ally of the month. Ganesh is a technical architect for Global Dots, which is the largest independent cloud and performance optimization integration partner worldwide. He has over 17 years of experience in the technology industry. Prior to joining Global Dots, he was a systems architect for AWS environments. He's currently focused on pre and post engineering with a particular passion for financial ops, cloud security, CDN, WAF, app security, zero trust solutions, and logging. Working with bleeding edge startups, he provides the latest and greatest in technology, as well as with established enterprise ready giants for those always on service. So please welcome Ganesh the Awesome joining us from London today. Welcome, Ganesh.
Pleasure to be here. Quite the introduction, and yeah, really happy to be in the room with you guys.
Well, thank you. So we've got some questions that we have curated from different sources. So we're going to bring those to you. But before we get started today for our allyship questions, I'd like to take a couple minutes to talk about your name, Ganesh the Awesome. In addition to the fact that you perform unbelievable tech magic in your current job, like an IT Swift Army knife approach in solving problems, there's a powerfully impactful story behind your name. Can you just briefly share that story with our audience today?
Sure. So the long version of this story takes 40 years to tell. So I'll definitely stick to the shorter version of the story. Um, I had a fairly traumatic incident happen in my childhood, and I carried this trauma through to my early 30s. And at some point in time, I decided that I ought to really approach this deep-seated trauma that had happened to me in my younger years. I had a process of self-exploration, and that included a lot of things of meditating and eating right and yoga and lots of other things. And in 2020, I had a full year of sobriety, and we'll all remember 2020 because it was very memorable for other reasons. So I had a full year of sobriety whilst also being locked down. And I sort of unraveled myself, and a string of very, very strange events happened to me. But the pinnacle moment of that was being an outdoor wedding and hearing a voice in my head that said, it's time to get rid of your name, because that's the lineage that you're holding is via the name, and you're going to rename yourself, and you're going to rename yourself to Ganesh. If you don't know, Ganesh is the Hindu elephant god deity. I didn't know that at the time, but at the exact moment when that happened to me, it was the celebration of Ganesh in the Hindu calendar. So it's the day on the calendar, particularly when they celebrate the birth of Ganesh. So I took it as a crazy sign from the universe that I was to do that. So I renamed myself to Ganesh the Awesome, and the awesome is not like I'm Ganesh the Awesome. in Hindu philosophy, Ganesh resides in the root chakra of your energy system, and so he resides in everybody. So the awesome is the fact that I'm awesome and you're awesome and we're all awesome. So everybody has awesome inside them. So it's that's the brief story of the name. And if you don't think I'm completely crazy by now, you definitely should. But that's what happened. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing that with us, because I read that and I thought it was, if everybody else didn't have the opportunity to read that, I think it's something that is good to share with everybody, because it is powerful. Okay, so let us take you to the questions then we have for today. So we'll start with just some basic allyship definitions. So what does being an ally in the streaming media industry mean to you?
Yeah, I wasn't really aware that I was an ally until recently, so it's quite an interesting question. But I guess for me, it just means doing the right thing at the right time to create an environment that you want to work in. And I think it's no great secret that it's a very male-dominated environment, and not just the media and streaming, but tech in general, I would say, sort of extending to Palo Alto and all these other companies. And I would say every single one of my colleagues would like to have more female co-workers in there, for balance and just for the female perspective on problem solving, etc., etc. And the only way that that's ever going to happen is if we all have some sort of mindset there where we're thinking about what that looks like for an environment to be inclusive to women. So I think that's what it means for me. Being an ally means thinking about a situation that encourages more women to come into the environment, I would say.
Okay, that's great. And so how do you think male leaders can do that? How can they bring in more women? What steps can they take to help their fellow colleagues in both in hiring and just workplace culture?
Yeah, I think, I mean, specifically around events. I mean, it was the Black Hat event that led us to this call that we're inside today. So if I think in the frame of events, there's a classic conference in London, which is Ice Gaming, which is part of the streaming and media world. Lots of casinos are there and online gambling and things like that. And they had a horrific track history of having, I would just call them, well, my aunt would call them dolly girls, but very scantily clad women offering trays of drinks and whatever, and completely nothing to do with the industry whatsoever. Like none of those people were hired by any of the organizations to do a function that wasn't just be present at this conference. It happened year upon year until eventually the BBC in the UK picked up on it. They did a hit piece on the convention and said, what's going on with this convention, that it's just completely, very low grade, basically, very degrading. And it had to change because of that. Now, I think it wouldn't have necessarily changed if it hadn't have had that BBC hit piece that was really like instrumental in it. But that isn't when you're thinking about that kind of situation, that isn't an environment that a conference that any woman would really want to go to. And I think if men put the lens on, or not just men, but organizers put the lens on, what does that look like from the other side? For example, if I went to a tech conference and it was full of Mr. Muscle, Arnold Schwarzenegger type characters who were all oiled up and looking like enormous beefcakes, like I would probably feel a bit uncomfortable. So, this is the kind of lens we have to think about, like what are we doing, and what does that look like on the flip side? And I think that's probably a pretty good place to start for the workplace culture.
Okay, so what advice would you offer to women currently that are in the streaming industry or in technology who may feel discouraged by incidents like Lampgate?
Firstly, like, please don't leave. We are completely bereft of women as it is, and but we can't afford to lose more, because it's it's a desert already. I've had a particular friend of mine, a very close friend of mine who's a female CISO, who I won't name her, but she had a particularly traumatic role, and some of the things that I heard, aggressive comments towards her on Zoom comments, very, very confrontational behavior towards her. And some of the stories I heard, she would have definitely had a tribunal in there and won if she'd have wanted to do that, but she didn't want to do it. And at the end of that, she had a sabbatical, and for 3 months she just had to sort of decompress from that environment because it was stressful and traumatic. And I had to beg her to stay in the industry, and I'm very glad she stayed, because she's very prominent in the UK, and a totally amazing person as well. But we the industry nearly lost a totally amazing woman because of this kind of stuff. And I think my message to other women out there is basically, please stick with it. We have to weather this storm, and it's not going to happen overnight. But the fact that I'm here having this conversation with you, to me, tells me that there's more eyes on it and more people looking at it. And we had a few years ago, we had the Me Too movement, which made a pretty dramatic shift for women in the workplace and just women in society in general. And I feel like Lampgate, as we called it, is the industry equivalent. I feel like this is the sort of the high watermark. And I don't put much on LinkedIn, to be honest. I'm not a very viral person. And the post I put on LinkedIn went incredibly viral and had lots of people reaching out to me who from all around the world, including people insulting me and all kinds of other things. But the fact that happened shows that we're at the tipping point, or if we're not at the tipping point, then the tipping point is coming very soon, because there's a lot more conversation around it. So yeah, stick with it, basically, and we're moving in the right direction, I would say.
Okay, great. The next couple questions we have for you, Ganesh, is around laddie culture. So with that, stops men from calling out laddie culture in the workplace, and how can we encourage more men to speak up?
Yeah, I think the laddie culture in the workplace it's literally just a byproduct of there not being enough women around. And if you think of seeing people's behavior on a night out, if you see just a whole group of guys on a night out, their behavior is wildly different than if their partners are there. So it's in this sort of metaphorical night out situation, the person who has to call out a bad behavior possibly has to be unpopular. So and possibly be a social pariah amongst another group of men. Speaking specifically about this LinkedIn comment, I had someone reach out and say that he called me a beta man, which I thought was quite hilarious, because I was mollycoddling or in some way virtue signaling for women, and the fact that I'd only put that comment on LinkedIn saying that this was incredibly terrible behavior from Palo Alto was to gain favor with women in some way. And I think that is kind of the undercurrent feeling of some of this laddie culture, that you're only going to speak out for it because you're trying to impress, or you're trying to virtue signal, or you're trying to do something like that. And I think that that's crap, basically. And there has to be a few people who are willing to be the sort of the PC person or the square person in order to sort of pull us in the right direction. Now, I can think of previous examples like the construction industry. So classic thing that used to happen in the construction industry, that the guys who are hanging on the scaffolding used to wolf whistle the women down on the streets, and the construction industry had to go through a thing to clean up their act. Now, I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen anymore. I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen anymore, not because all of the people decided to stop wolf whistling, but it came from the top. And I think this kind of stopping of laddie culture has to come from the top. So it's got to be CEOs, it's got to be heads of departments, it's got to be all this kind of thing. And you know, there's a classic story of wild stallions. So a pack of horses in the wild, if they don't have a strong male leader, or rather when they have a strong male leader, they'll run in formation and they'll run in a nice pack. If they lose that strong male in the pack and the young bucks are just kind of left to their own devices, they go ape wild and they kick and they don't run in formation and they're just loose. And I feel like that's quite a good analogy that there needs to be these strong stallion types who are willing to like lead the younger in the right direction. And I think I'm right in saying it has to be driven by age and it has to be driven by seniority, I would say.
So in your opinion, how does laddie culture impact the industry's ability to attract and retain female talent?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I have a good example actually, and it's again, it's that thing of not wanting, imagining the lens the other way around and situations that you wouldn't want to be involved with, and overhearing a conversation at a booth when I was at the World Aviation Festival recently, somebody talking about going to their local gym, and they really love going to work out in their local gym. And there's all these girls that are there in tight lycra, and he likes to look at them, and that's what helps him pump more weights. And this is a completely ridiculous alpha male conversation over a beer in a pub or something. It's like um, some sort of Joe Rogan type conversation, and it's totally not applicable. It's totally not for the workplace, probably any workplace, but totally not for one where you want women to be involved or feel inclusive. I can't think of what the opposite of that would be, to be honest. A conversation that would make me feel uncomfortable, but these kind of things, and we just have to be, or people have to be, just more conscious of that. And I think because it's so male dominated, a conversation like that I overheard can just go under the radar, and it's nobody says anything, it's just normalized. And because nobody says anything and it's normalized, it just carries on. And I think that's it. I think it's kind of the industry, and we're not even aware of the culture, I would say. Like I would say that person telling that story probably had no idea that that could have made somebody else feel uncomfortable. So I think just being more conscious of it, I would say.
Okay, great. Thanks. So thinking about male advocacy, in what ways can male colleagues advocate for their female peers in the workplace, particularly when it comes to promotions, recognition, opportunities for growth?
Yeah, I think we need to be actually biased towards women, which is not to say that we overpraise or mollycoddle or hire over the top of people in an incorrect way if it's not the right job role or something like that. But a good example of being more biased towards women, there was a company called Lacework, and they did a Women in Tech series, and they collected female heads of security and CISOs and lots of other things. And they did a series of some of the prominent women in tech. And as part of that, they rotated a bunch of, I think it was 25 maybe, rotated 25 pictures of these prominent women in tech on Times Square. And it was a really great thing they did. It was all over LinkedIn, and that kind of praise is really good for the industry, because you can see that women are being recognized in a very prominent way, in a very sort of international and wide reaching way. And And I think that's the kind of thing where it is going to really encourage women to come in. From the other side, the what can they do in the workplace? I would say there's always room for a program of some description. In fact, only today, I saw Cloudflare, who is the biggest, probably one of the biggest streaming providers in the world, teamed up with Accenture, and they had a Cyber First day for Cyber First for girls in Newcastle in the UK, and it was taking 30 students and giving them a boot camp, basically. And initiatives like that, essentially just being biased towards women for that case, because we clearly don't need to be biased towards men, because the industry is already full of men. So that whatever's getting men into the industry is already working. We don't need to touch that, basically.
So talking about biases, how can male allies challenge unconscious bias, both in themselves and within their teams?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think there's an argument there that the industry leans into it being a male-dominated environment anyway, and I think I sort of agree with that, in the same way that, well, it's a lot of maths and a lot of engineering, and I'm pretty sure if I went to a university today and I went into the maths and the engineering departments, they would still be fairly male dominated. But I know it definitely doesn't have to be this way, and I've seen it internationally. And Israel, for example, has a 50-50 split, roughly, of men to women inside their tech departments. So it doesn't have to be the case that there's an unconscious bias or something like that. I feel the larger problem is that there isn't enough up and coming inside most other markets, like especially inside the UK and Europe, but US as well, I would say. So the kind of the need for new recruits coming up and through, I would say, is really where the crux of it is.
So, I agree with you that it has predominantly previously been male dominated, and people argue, that things should change and we need to continue to get women involved. And it's great to hear about those statistics in Israel. But what, like, as we start looking at those, how do we get more women involved? And how do men talk about their preferences or their skills rather than the cultural issues?
I think that the source of women in Israel for their tech environment was women at the end of the day. So there wasn't some magic trick that Israel pulled in order to get to 50-50. I have a strong suspicion that the reason there is a very high percentage of women in tech in Israel is because they have army conscription, and a lot of them go through the tech side of the army. So when they come out of the army, they're highly skilled up. But we don't have to follow that model. Obviously, we can follow an other governmental project. And I think it's about making these streams. There's a few initiatives in the UK. Girls That Code is another good example of a kind of female-led initiative. But we need more of those, basically, more and specific internships for women. I mean, historically, I've been in a hiring position for a fintech company when I was based in London, and I had an all-male team, and I told my recruiter that I didn't want another man in the team. So I said I only want to see female candidates. And at that time, he couldn't find me the candidates that were suitable for the job role. So I was there being 100% biased, saying I only want a woman, and couldn't be sent them. So there's a break. There was a break in the pipe somewhere where there was a missing educational gap or a missing internship program. Looking back retrospectively, I could have created that internship, but didn't have the I probably wasn't so focused on the fact that there's such a problem in the industry, but creating those internships and creating those spaces where you can grow somebody if they don't have the skills, again, is probably a good way to start evening the playing field.
Right. And growing women in the industry, giving them those opportunities, mentorship is obviously something that comes to mind. And, you know, we need to have more male advocates and mentors to help bring the women and give them those opportunities, make them aware of those opportunities and help them with the right skill set. So how would you think, what ways would you recommend that male mentors in the industry could provide more equitable opportunities for women for mentorship?
Yeah. Again, I wouldn't say the problem was around, or it doesn't feel to me like the problem is specifically around mentorship. I would say there's just an outright lack of women to mentor or who get to that position. So I think the foundational part of getting just more people in the environment, because you know I've just come from the World Aviation Festival in Amsterdam. We had we were partnered with a company called Expel, which is based out of the US. Two very good senior sales engineers were there from that side, both women, and totally amazing to see that. And this is kind of and they're about, I would say, 10 to 15 years younger than me. And so I see that the sort of next generation is starting to get populated a little bit more of people that are in my sort of age range bracket. You don't see it. You know, the percentage is incredibly low. So I feel like the mentorship will be sort of automatic once the women arrive in junior roles inside security companies or inside streaming companies or inside whatever. And I guess that's kind of positive that I'm seeing that inside the industry. Like I am genuinely seeing more women in technical roles than ever before. So, and as I say, I think the mentorship just comes naturally out of that. There'll be no shortage of people like more than happy to mentor women when they get to that point.
So just kind of adding on to that, just from my personal experience, I come from a family talking about aviation. My husband works as an operational Delta. My son's in college to be a pilot, and my daughter, who's 27, is a commercial pilot. And so she is one of those few people that is in the industry in that role. And, while she's got a seat at the table, it's very often that she's out on a plane and she will get, she'll be maybe, greeting passengers in the jetway or in the airport. And she may be standing next to a male flight attendant. And very often she will get that she's the flight attendant and he's the pilot. So it is very much that she gets called out and does not get the respect that she deserves, or she'll be asked, is she old enough to fly the plane? Or people that are nervous to know that there's a female pilot flying the plane. So, so it is interesting too, to have, the women coming up into that, but it's also about getting the respect that the men have had in these spaces.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And it's funny actually. I saw an incident on the train the other day where two strangers were talking, and one said to the other, "Are you in? What do you do for a living?" And she said, "I'm in medicine." And the man immediately said, "So you're a nurse?" And she said, "No, I'm a doctor." But if I was a man, you would have asked me if I was a doctor and not a nurse. So we obviously have these inbuilt biases for that. And again, it's about leveling up our consciousness on these topics. I'm very sure the same arguments raged about race, and still do rage about race, with these unconscious biases that we're not aware of. So it's catching ourselves in the moment, I think, and just trying to be more aware.
Okay, so here's just a question about how did you react when you first saw Lampgate at the Black Hat Conference in Las Vegas? What was your first word that you thought of when you first saw that?
Yeah, initial thoughts was not too much because I had it down that they were mannequins, and I didn't actually realize that they were real live women. And then once I realized it was real live women, just sort of bemused, shocked. I'm not a typical person to go out onto LinkedIn and do anything posts around that. I usually use it just as a professional network. I'm not really interested in using it for politics or any other reason. But it was just so ridiculous, and I don't know what the thought was behind it or how it managed to get past so many people that it came to be a real live reality. But yeah, it just speaks volumes that how upside down the marketing and events organization is, that so many people could just think that that's all right. And it does, after being shocked and yeah, just appalled by it, really. And knowing, I spoke previously about women in the industry who left because of like aggressive incidents, and then I see something like that, and I just roll my eyes, thinking how many people would have seen that, and then just thought, well, this industry is just full of assholes, and then just walked away. So it was a bit saddening as well. But I feel like as we had the Me Too moment, and now we have the Lampgate moment, it's kind of a slow steering of the ship in the right direction. And each little micro movement pushes us more towards the right way. And maybe Lampgate was a blessing in disguise, because it went so viral and it was such a news sensation, including across all the major like Wall Street journals and BBC Newses and Washington Post and whatever. That it highlighted the problem. So I think probably in the end it was a blessing in disguise.
Okay, that is interesting. And like you said, each bit of those pieces makes hopefully monumental changes within the whole, women advocacy and allyship.
Well, with there's an interesting concept of a thing called a trim tab. So on an oil tanker, the huge rudder that steers the oil tanker, it's too big to move by itself. So there's too much weight and there's too much water that you can't move the actual rudder itself. But it has like a little extension on there, which is called a trim tab. And the trim tab moves just a tiny bit, and then it steers the whole rest of the rudder. And I like to think of these little things like the trim tab of behavior. So, they seem like little things, but the ripple on effect can actually be huge. So yeah, think of the trim tab when you
Okay.
if you're in doubt.
I'm going to write that one down. That's a good one. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so like you had the courage, and and that's the reason that we have you here and we're applauding you, to step out when you witnessed the bad behavior at the Black Hat Conference. But how do we encourage other men that witness these things, to these sexist behaviors, unacceptable behavior at events or workplace? How do we encourage them to speak out?
Yeah, I think the social media is good in extreme cases only. So despite the fact that that's the reason we're here today, I'm not sure that I would advocate that for sort of petty interactions or for things to be dragged over the coals. And I think for day-to-day interactions, like one-to-ones are best. So I recently read a book, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. I don't know if you heard of it. Totally incredible book. It's about resolving conflicts in a way where everyone feels heard, and it reduces conflict enormously, and the sort of time to resolution is much quicker. And there's very comical examples of marriages that had problems for 20 years and he managed to get to the bottom of it in 20 minutes in a session. But, you know, having some communication skills is going to be required, because you're shouting somebody out in public and saying, you know, that behavior is bad, you shouldn't do that. You know, people don't respond to the stick. You know, they respond to the carrot. And the first thing is to sort of lead by example, obviously, you know, take the higher path for those things. But if you see something that's not correct, especially if it's inside your own organization, you can pull them aside. And it doesn't have to be like a telling off. It can just be your view of what you think they've said and why that would not foster a good environment for women. And, you know, having some communication skills, like active listening, like making sure you're making eye contact, like using non-violent communication, these kind of things. These are the kind of soft skills that we'll have to use inside these laddie cultures and with colleagues, because I don't see that on the whole it's being led from the top at the moment. I don't see that CEOs or enormous enterprise companies have any sort of real program about what behavior should look like in their company. They might pay some lip service, but it's definitely not being looked at on the ground level. So one-to-one conversations and the ripple effect, I would say, is probably is going to make some changes.
Okay, that's great. Do we have any questions from the audience that anybody would like to ask? Or we have Ganesh with us? I did see in the chat that we had a question about the laddie culture. So I wanted to see if somebody would like to, Peggy, I think you responded on that one. If you would like to share just for our streaming audience that may not see the response to that. Did you want to share that, or would you like me to read what you have?
Well, it's a Wikipedia definition, so it's not as if I came up with it. It's quite a British term, so let me read it out just for anybody watching after. Lad culture was a media-driven, principally British and Irish subculture of the 1990s and the early 2000s. The term lad culture continues to be used today to refer to collective, boorish or misogynistic behavior by young heterosexual men, particularly university students. So source is Wikipedia, but I think it's quite a British term, so I suppose an American audience struggles a bit with understanding it.
Yeah, I would just thinking young, drunk, heterosexual students, college students, you know, that roughly sums up lad culture, I would say. Yeah, laddie culture.
Cheeky pint with the lads, yeah.
Cheeky pint with the lads, indeed. Yes, exactly that.
Okay, anybody else have any questions?
No, just a thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Dipalia's
I do
questions.
have I do have a question. Like, you know, when I saw Ganesh your post, and I felt like, you know, asking you an interesting question. Like, after your LinkedIn post, first of all, as you rightly said, most of the time we see, we discuss, and we consciously, unconsciously don't post, you know, such things on the LinkedIn. And when you know, actually post this on LinkedIn, you probably receive the mixed reactions from your network, like someone feeling like, wow, a lot of women praising, and someone is like, hey, what's happening? Like, you know, a lot of criticism around it. So my question is like, overall, did it encourage you or discouraged you as an individual? Like, what was your reaction?
Good question. I found it encouraging that it had so much reach, and I don't remember the metrics, but you know, tens or hundreds of thousands of views on it, which is completely viral in my world. And it was quite heartwarming and surprising to have so many people reach out to say thanks for sticking up for us, people I'd never met. But then there was kind of some level of trolling and a number of, there was quite a lot of, I would just call it administration off the back of it in order to defend a post or to write this and that. And yeah, I wanted to do it justice, and everybody that messaged me, I wanted to respond, whether it was good or bad, attacking me or praising me. I felt like I had this duty of responsibility to reply and defend to every comment. So it was incredibly time consuming, to be honest. So on the basis of administration, I would be put off from doing it in the future. But I don't suspect I will ever have a post that's that viral again. So yeah.
Yeah. And, kind of couple of things you really very well said. It's not going to happen overnight. And we all know that, every step we take at a time, every action we take is a kind of, common goal towards the diversity which we are trying to improve in the industry. Like your one post is one step for one time, but it might have encouraged others, so many people in the industry to call out that culture, maybe not on LinkedIn, but at least while they are crafting the marketing plan, they might think of it like, okay, at least with the social responsibility, they will think twice before doing such things. And it's very difficult. I think communication is important. Having these conversations is very, very important. And at Women in Streaming Media, we are trying to do the same. Like when we started this Allyship program, many people ask us, like, what are the conversation you're going to have? Like every time, if you ask people just what is Allyship to you, it's not going to solve the problem. But imagine today's conversation is so different. And this is recorded conversation so that people can refer in the future and also create awareness about it and have the conversation within their teams. I have a second question for you, which is like, in terms of the everyday actions or everyday steps, what do you think, what are the three important steps or actions ally leaders can take in their everyday life to create an inclusive environment for women in their organizations?
Yeah, I think going back to my comment about the horses, I think taking the job or taking that lead stallion role, and that would be kind of the number one. And it might not necessarily be a popular thing to do. And like, as I mentioned, I had that beta male comment, so it's not seen as an alpha male thing to take up that position. But so to take up that position would definitely be the one. I mentioned it already, but the second thing would be, if you're in a position where you can create a role or create a space, then to do that. So whether that's an internship or even if it's just sponsoring an event like Accenture did with Cloudflare to sponsor this female student event in Newcastle, something like that. And then the third thing would be just to think about that lens, just always be thinking about the 180-degree lens and what's the inverse of that look like, and would I feel comfortable? And I kind of smile thinking about the idea that I would go to a convention and it would be full of bodybuilders covered in olive oil or something. It would be an insane thing to see that, but that's what happens the other way around, and it's just so normalized that nobody says anything. So I think those would probably be my three things, really.
Excellent. And Rose, would you like to read some of the, great comments which you found on the post? I just saw your message on the chat.
I'm in a public place right now that's a little loud, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear me, but I was not aware of Lampgate, and so I wanted to just take a look at some of that information and what had happened, some photos, and there is a hashtag attached to it for anyone that would like to go ahead and just do some research on what happened with that hashtag Lampgate.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's a very fun news story to follow, and with public embarrassments and retracted statements and all kinds of things. So I think Palo Alto had unbelievable egg on their face post it, and well, if there's one company that's going to have a very strong female culture moving forward, we know it's going to be Palo Alto. So good for them.
Yeah, and I think the conversation is important. We are trying to do. You actually spoke about a couple of really good points. One is the conversation. The second is mentorship. Like, if we give those opportunities, we give those skills to women and ensure that they are ready for the leadership roles. You will always have the female candidate for the leadership role, and you will not have the only candidates. Or just male candidates when it comes to the recruitment process. But great conversation, Ganesh. I think, thank you so much, first of all, raising your voice and creating this awareness on LinkedIn. The second important thing is saying yes and coming on this call and, sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you so much for that. As we wrap up this, insightful session, I want to again thank to everyone who is joined on the call. And this discussion on redefining the culture, how the allies can advocate for the women in streaming media, was definitely encouraging. Your engagement and thoughtful questions have highlighted the importance of the fostering inclusive workplace for the women is really important. As we explore, the meaningful allyship is not just about the intention, but also action. At one point, if you're taking an individual, interpersonal, or structural action, it's definitely going to create the more opportunities for women and more inclusive environment for the women. I hope today's conversation has been inspiring for each of us to reflect on the role we play in reshaping the culture in the industry. Let's continue to be intentional advocates for the change. Together, we can build a streaming media landscape where everyone is included. Thank you once again, and let's keep this momentum going. For more discussions, collaborations, and connect with Ganesh, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. You can also write to us on email, allyship@womeninstreamingmedia.org. A quick reminder, our monthly remote member meetup is happening next Thursday, October 24th at 9 a.m. PST, 11 a.m. EST, and 4 p.m. PST. Don't miss this month's remote member meetup because we have an exclusive workshop on Inner Critic by Tech System. You will find the details of the event, the remote member meetup on our LinkedIn page on our website. Thank you, Ganesh, once again for being such an awesome ally. And thank you everyone for joining this call. See you next month to our another awesome ally of the month. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.